Welcome to the Startup Support Surgery podcast, where we light the entrepreneurial spark in medics and healthcare professionals. Join me, Dr. Jo Watkins, GP, business coach and co-founder of The How People, on a journey to discover where your medical know-how meets the business world. This will help you find some clarity on how to balance work, passions and family so that you can gain more freedom and control over your life, but also continue to help people, which is actually why most of us went into medicine to start with. Embarking on this entrepreneurial adventure is not easy. It is a roller coaster of emotions, but it's hugely rewarding and exciting in the process. Drawing on my 20 years of blending medicine and business as a GP, I am here to share experiences, insights and lessons. Expect lively chats, expert interviews and real-life stories from medics who have taken their own path. Let's break free from traditional healthcare norms and explore more innovative ways of making a real difference to people's health and well-being, along with paving the way for a brighter future for us as healthcare professionals. Oh, don't miss my free PDF called From Stethoscope to Startup, which is an 11-page guide in the show notes full of practical help and advice. This is your roadmap to kickstarting your journey with us. Enjoy the show. We have hit record today because I came across this amazing human this week called Ellie Todd, and we exchanged a few messages on LinkedIn. And as I have done a couple of times before, I've done it with two other podcasts. So I've been exchanging voice notes and then suddenly we've got on a conversation. We've said, let's have a cup of tea, let's have a chat. And we've just pressed record. So that's what we've done this time. So it's a kind of welcome to the podcast / hi, Ellie, nice to meet you kind of conversation. But Ellie, tell us a little bit about who you are so that you can introduce yourself better than I just did.
Hi, Jo. So I describe myself as a portfolio career doctor. I think that's the simplest way to define it. I am a self-confessed workaholic and I do lots of different things for work, basically. And they are largely centered around either working as a doctor or running my own business ventures. And then when I'm not doing those things, it's either I'm getting busy in the gym or outside exploring, or doing something that kind of just like gets me moving and exploring the outdoors. So yeah, so I do quite a few different things. I'm not a conventional medic. I'm definitely not following a conventional career path. And that is a message that I try and spread wide. And I think that's probably how you found me. So yeah, and that's partly one of the things I do is trying to basically empower others, especially other healthcare professionals who are perhaps feeling a little bit uncertain and unfulfilled maybe in their existing career about what they can do to change that and how they can maybe navigate any career doubts and start a business if that's something that they want to do. But I do try and
Amazing.
be a bit pragmatic and share the reality because it's not all roses, as I'm sure you will be
Yeah.
very much sharing to your listeners.
Yeah, 100%. Real life, this is actually what it's all about, is very, very important. So that's awesome. Right. So you're a portfolio doctor and a self-confessed workaholic. I love that because actually to do all these things, to make all this stuff happen, it's not magic, is it? It takes a lot of hard work. So
Yeah.
tell me how far into your sort of medical career was it before you diversified?
Oh, great question. So, to be honest, even before I started studying at university, I was already dabbling in various different things. So, I did a lot of tutoring as a student at my secondary school, helping people in like the years below me, mainly getting into like entrance school exams. And then I was one of those that loved science, didn't know what I wanted to do then. I guess I still don't know what I want to do now, as that narrative hasn't changed. And, people were like, oh, well, if you love science, you love maths, why don't you do medicine? Like, that'd be a great idea. No one else in my family were medics. But there was very much the narrative of, well, look, if you get to a good uni, you study medicine, the world's your oyster. And I've always kind of lived by that narrative. And it's something that my mum has always said to me, you can do anything. And as I've come to learn, you can do anything, but you can't do everything. So I ended up applying for medicine. I got into Oxford, studied at Oxford Uni, and there I did my preclinical, which was very much lecture based. You don't even step foot in the hospital. And at that point, I was already thinking, oh God, is this really what I want to do? I'm not sure. Like maybe I do want to go into like management consultancy. And I was surrounded by others that doing PPE, business, like finance degrees, like going off and doing their like summer internships. And there's that bit of me thinking, oh, would I prefer the corporate life? I don't know. Decided to stick with it and go, let's crack on, let's do the clinical years, make sure that I haven't really given this a shot. Did the clinical, and I found it hard being a clinical medical student, like being on the wards. I found actually that I really struggled being kind of like I felt like I was in the way a lot, and I didn't like that aspect to it. But I did start to enjoy the medicine more and actually applying what we'd learned. But there was still this part of me that was like, I don't know. And I hadn't found a specialty that I really liked. I was still doing a lot of tutoring, which I loved. And so I basically started at that point reaching out to the careers advisors at uni and got quite a lot of support from them actually. And I joined a couple of kind of there's loads of resources available, but there's also loads of like societies where you do like management consultancy projects and things like that. So I started getting into that space. I actually applied for some management consultancy jobs thinking this is what I wanted to do. Didn't get any offers in my final year as a med student. So I was like, okay, I'll just crack on and do F1, F2. Did F1, started doing F1. And again, like the learning curve I loved. And I think, we all love that challenge. We like suddenly thrown into this environment. It was great. It was fast. It was hard work, which I think we all thrive off, but I was still just like this. I don't see myself aligning with this end goal. So I again reapplied for management consultancy stuff. And again, like like you go through so many rounds of interviews, and I again didn't get any job offers. So kind of got to this point where I was like, what do I do? Do I just keep applying for stuff, or do I start taking more control of this situation myself? And at that point, I was in a relationship where my partner had started a startup in the skiing industry, and I'd seen him and his two mates, the three of them, which no discredit to them, but like, they've not got an A level between them, but very passionate about the skiing industry, very competent and capable, go off and raise investment and start a business. And I just sat and thought, if they can do this, like, surely I can do this, right? And I found myself in the middle of lockdown or at the start of lockdown, kind of getting through my F2. My brother and I were looking at basically setting up a Airbnb rental property. We started getting involved in kind of like looking into the property industry and the property space. And we came up with this business idea and we were like, let's crack on. He got furloughed, so he had nothing to work on and was sat at home twiddling his thumbs. I was still working in the hospital, but was coming home, still like chomping at the bit to be working on something of my own. And so, yeah, we launched our first business, our first proper business, I'd say. And that's kind of how it started. And then I finished my F2. I didn't I didn't apply for specialty training because I didn't have a specialty that I wanted to apply for. And I was in this situation where I launched this business with my brother and we wanted to just kind of give that a go. And in being in the middle of the pandemic as well, I just then carried on locuming in A&E. And I've basically just been doing that ever since.
And you still locuming in A&E, you still do
Yeah, yes,
locum
I
shifts.
still
You're
like
a
not as much as I did before. So it's something I talk quite a lot about on social media in terms of like the reality of working as a locum because it's not as it's often I think overly glamorized and it's definitely changed in the last I'd say the last 18 months hugely. But yeah, so I do still work, just not as much as I perhaps would like to.
And I think that's something that you touched on. I think the first time I heard you speak was on the Medics Money podcast, and you talked about locuming then and about this thing that, well, this aspect of not pulling away completely from your clinical job, even though it doesn't, there's this lack of alignment, and you're thinking, oh, well, this isn't quite for me. There's nothing I dread more than somebody getting in touch with me and saying, I've walked away from my job, I've given up my job, I'm ready to go on my business. And I'm like, no, stop, like rewind the clock
Go
because
back.
yes, exactly, exactly. Because you need that income. Like the reality of business, as we will come to, is that that income takes a while to come. So I love the fact you're locuming in A&E, you're doing the shifts. I think A&E and GP really lend themselves brilliantly to being able to balance it until such a point that you can actually step outside. And someone said to me once, until you're actually losing money by not working on your
Then
business,
step away. Yeah.
then step away. And I think that's really important. So let's just go back a little bit. I think what I'm hearing from you, and what I hear from a lot of people that I speak to on the podcast and generally medics that come into my world, is this love of learning.
Yeah.
essentially give you something to do, and you will go out there and you will do it and you will learn and you'll probably be brilliant at it. How do you think that's been helpful to you now you're on this entrepreneurial journey, or since you decided to start this business with your brother?
It's the most important skill set. Like, it is by far the most important skill set. And this is why I say I think medics can, like, any medic can start a business, because you have all the skills you need because you are able to learn. And you've got a stack of undeniable proof that you can learn. Like, you spent 6 years studying and the rest in training, learning, and you can do the exact same in the business space. I just think it is obviously a very different type of learning in the sense that often it has to be very self-directed. Like, you have to go out and try and, like, Google stuff, search for stuff, look online, talk to people, sit and maybe apply for courses if there's, courses available that will help you fast track learning things. But ultimately, you can learn how to brand, you can learn how to build a website, you can learn how to build a massive tech stack if that's what you need to build. You can learn how to sort out your CRM and get your posts going on socials, and how to set up payment processes. Like, you can do all of this. You can learn all of this. Like, yes, it might take time, but you can learn it, and you're more than capable of doing that. Yeah.
So doctors have got this inbuilt ability to learn, which is a massive advantage going into the entrepreneurial space. What about the disadvantages? Because there are some, aren't there? Difficulties that medics have at taking this jump. And mostly what I see is the lack of kind of hoops to jump through or hurdles set out in front of you. We've gone through GCSEs, A levels, etc. With this, like, just count next you do this, next you do this, next you do this. Do you see that cropping up sometimes as a problem?
Yeah, two key things, I think. There's probably more that I can come, but two key ones that always just sit and blinker at me is, number one, perfectionism. Like, we are perfectionists. And this is something that I noticed when my brother and I were starting our first business. We were very much like, okay, we're going to build this amazing website that's a two-sided marketplace. It's going to help people who need help buying a property find a property professional. There needs to be profiles for those property professionals. There needs to be messaging functions so they can chat to each other. There needs to be like a payment process so they can pay invoices. And we thought of all this stuff, and we then were like, okay, we need to go and get some quotes to get it branded. In landed our first quote that's in, I kid you not, like, we're talking tens of thousands. Then it was, okay, how are we going to get this website built? Another quote. We're talking like, as a prototype that we can just show to investors, like a couple of, again, like tens of thousands, but to get it built properly, we're looking at a couple of 100,000. And we're like looking at each other like, oh, what have we started? We want to do this properly, but actually, this isn't the space we know. And we wanted to do everything perfectly, but we were just suddenly so quickly faced with the reality that starting a business, you might want to do things a certain way. And yes, you might want a perfectly branded business, and you want everything to look like the companies that you see on the TV and on the railway lines, in their adverts. But actually, starting a business is often messy. It's often a case of just trying to get stuff out there. They often use the expression like throwing stuff at a wall and seeing what shit sticks. And it really is. And we were forced really quickly to go, okay, we don't have tens of thousands to invest in this business. How can we do this as, like, basically as simply as possible, that doesn't look unprofessional, but at the same time isn't like as sophisticated as, say, other businesses that are existing. And so, you can just create so many barriers for yourself if you want to as a perfectionist. Like, it is innate to us. But actually, the faster you start just moving forward and just, okay, create some brand colors, like choose a brand palette. What do you like? Like, what aligns with your target customer? Like, let's just design a logo. Let's just get a website up that does the basic. Like, yes, we need terms and conditions in place and all that kind of stuff. But, it's trying to not let your perfectionism hold you back. And I think that's really key. And yes, there are certain things you have to do when it comes to starting a business in terms of legalities and getting it set up properly. And those are, very specific things that you do need to get ticked off and done. But you can procrastinate a lot if you try and do things too perfectly, and ultimately you won't get your product out there. And then there is that sense of directionless. I say there's like certain steps that you need to take to set up a business, and yes, there are those things that you need to do. But once you've kind of done those things, like, ultimately you can take your business in whatever direction you want. If you want to focus on this marketing strategy, you can. If you want to focus on making those kind of like collaborations and those certain campaigns, and you know, you can do whatever you want with your business. There's no kind of rule book of, okay, the first step is to go and do this, the second step is to go and do this. Is completely down to you, and you're steering that ship, and no one's telling you where to go. And sometimes you don't know where you're going, which makes it really hard because then you're like, I've got these sales and I don't know which I don't know which direction I'm going to be pulling them in. Even my brother, who's not a medic, has found that hard because you do sometimes sit and wonder, like, am I doing the right thing? And the truth is, the longer I've been doing this, the more I realize, and I can see in other people, and other people that have been very successful as well, that no one knows. Like, no one has a clue. And everyone is just trying stuff. It like the journey of entrepreneurship is about experimentation. It's about trying different things, seeing what works, seeing what gets adapted by and adopted by your customers, and like making tweaks here and there, adapting to the market and trends that are going on, and just experimenting, which can be hard, but it's something that you have to try and get used to as well. Yeah.
Think you're 100% spot on, and this is everybody that isn't a medic too. You know, this journey of uncertainty, I think it's like, sailing a ship without a rudder, and you have to be able to do that. And that's a skill that I think medics have to learn from the outset. And I think if that's not for you, I'm very much somebody that is very honest about this. The first time I ever tried a proper business. I mean, I did a business probably 18 years ago, but my first proper business was 15 years ago. And, it is literally has been a journey of creative challenges, movement, pivoting, working out that's not for me. That's not that. I actually really enjoyed that. I love working with that person, opening doors, peeking round the corner, shutting them again, or leaving them a little bit open, all the way through. And most people don't like that. And it's okay to find that uncomfortable, and it's not for everybody. So I think the worst thing you can do is think that this is what you want and not give it a go. So if this creative idea or this business idea, or you want to get something off the ground, and this constant need to move quickly, get something to market, is this a problem only you're having, or is there a need out there? And are acting quickly and in small, tiny, affordable chunks. So you're not spending lots of time or money, but you need to spend some time and money. That's the reality. To know whether this is something you want to do or not. Because a lot of people would find what you've just said quite stressful for them, because there's no guarantees, are there?
No, and this is the key thing, which is a mistake we nearly made as my brother and I. You know, we like I said, if you go right back to the beginning when we started Doormarked, which was this first business, we were getting these quotes and we were thinking, okay, we need to raise from family or friends. Like, should we raise investment? Like, this is what I'd seen my partner do. And then it was like, okay, well, we'll get our SEIS and our EIS advanced insurance so we can then start pitching and raise investment. And we invested so much time. We probably invested a year into having discussions, optimizing our pitch deck, pitching to angel investors and VCs, to be told by VCs and pretty much most angel investors that we had no proof of concept because we were just a prototype. And actually, at this stage, as much as it sounded like a great idea, they couldn't afford to take that risk. For us eventually to go, they don't want to take the risk. Like, why are we trying to ask our friends and family to take a risk? Like, this is when you start a business where you've got no proof of concept, it's literally like pouring cash down a drain. Like, you don't know if that cash is going to come back up, or if, like, you could be just burning it. Um, and I see so many people do this when they go to start a business and they invest a lot. Like, I don't actually think I've said it on any podcast, so this is a first, but my brother and I, in total, probably invested about £30,000 into Doormarked, of which we've not got back. It is
Mm,
revenue generating, but it's not providing us with salaries, and it's profitable monthly, but it's not yet giving us that finance back. And that's something that we've both taken away from that particular business. Is like, this was a huge learning curve and like amazing, such a good experience for us because we could have invested a lot more and lost a lot more. And whether we will, like I said, hopefully we will eventually see that come back, but it takes a long time.
yeah. How
Um,
many years into that business are you now?
so it's been revenue generating since about 2021,
Yeah,
2022. So
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So for people listening, that the business is bringing in enough money to cover its costs, to pay whatever, outgoings you have or staff or people that you have, but you're not taking a wage from that business and you've invested money in that business that hasn't been paid back to you since. And that is a very normal
Yeah.
situation. I mean, that's a great situation to be in at this point with a revenue generating,
Yeah.
potentially profitable business, after 4 years.
Yeah.
But that's a reality. You're
Yeah.
not taking a wage from this. And I think that's not understood enough when people go into it. And I think I see medics going in, we're incredibly fortunate to have the job for life thing is now a little bit less
Guaranteed.
guaranteed. But we have a good wage coming in,
Yeah.
a monthly wage that comes into your bank account, whether you've done a job to 100% of your ability or whether you've actually shown up half-assed for the last month, you're gonna get paid at the end of it. So I think that's really important for you to share, and I've shared a similar story about, all of my businesses, and I think that's the reality that people need to see. I just want to pick up on something that you've talked about a lot, and I love your honesty about this. You've talked about your no's, you've talked about fails, you've talked about not getting things and things not working out. Talked about applying for jobs for management consultancies, and you've just talked about pitching, going for the, going in front of people, VCs, and getting no's. How important is accepting failures and no's and learning from them in entrepreneurship and business?
Like, it is so important. It is so important. But it's not easy. And you will want to resist them so hard, but you do also need to listen to them. So if I give a good example, as a business, we were a two-sided marketplace where we have our property professionals and ultimately we have people then coming to us who say, oh, I need help buying a house in Liverpool or I need help buying a house in like Manchester, but I don't live there and I want someone that's on the ground that can help me find it and, maybe get it set up if I want to start renting it out, etc. And we'd spent months building the website and like building a prototype and then reaching out to property professionals going, hey, would you like to sign up to the platform? Like when it's live, like this is what we'll do. You'd be advertising your services. The way in which you get paid, or like the way in which you have to like pay to use the platform is basically we sell you a lead as and when that person comes in and says, hey, I need help, we like tender it out ultimately for a fixed cost. And, we had all these property professionals coming to us saying, yeah, this sounds like a great idea. This sounds like a great idea. I'd use this platform. And we'd anticipated like how many leads we'd be getting in, how much revenue we'd be taking from these property professionals. And it was all great. I don't think we were even pitching at this stage. We were just discussing it with a kind of like incubator that were kind of trying to help us. And this woman just sat and said there, she was like, their verbal agreement means nothing. So you've got no property professionals actually like that have paid to use your platform, really, have you? And it was a bit like, well, at this stage, at this stage, they can't buy in. But at the same point, she was right. Like, no one had actually like exchanged cash to consume our product. At that point in time, I didn't really appreciate the value of it. And it's only now, like 5 years later, that I sit and remember that conversation and go, do you know what? It's so true. Like reaching out to people and saying, hey, would you like the idea of this product? Like, what do you think of this, this, and this? And like, this is how much it would cost. Like, what do you think? Like, that's great. And it's really important market research. But ultimately, don't get too excited because you may not actually have people coming and paying for stuff and like buying it. It's a very different someone verbally agreeing that they're going to consume something and then actually coughing up cash. And so that no from her, like initially hurt so much. And I remember my brother and I, like our tone in that call, we suddenly became quite defensive and we came off it being like, oh, well, who's she? Like, blah, 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 blah. And you take it so personally because what you're doing, like, regardless whether it's me, like applying for jobs and facing rejection, or whether it's you starting up a business, like, it's so personal. This is also personal. And your business, you treat it like a baby because, it's something you've worked so hard on. Um, you do need to kind of push on through. Absolutely. And like a no doesn't mean you have to stop, but you do need to, I think, use that as like a signpost to kind of go like, okay, let's check in here. Let's reflect. Like, let's take some time away from this situation and then let's come back at it and go, okay, was that a valid no? Like, is there stuff I can learn from this? Did they actually have a point? Like, what was it that they presented that was their kind of reasoning for that no? Is that something that we need to be worried about or that we actually need to kind of reflect and review on? And and kind of go from there. And I think for me, I subconsciously did that when it came to all the management consultancy rejections, because I'd got to the point of having like 3 rounds of interviews with BCG for them to come back and say, no, that was 2 years running. So I'd done that twice. For them to come back the second year and go, oh, yeah, just reapply again. There's not really any constructive feedback we can give you. Like it was, you're kind of fine. It was just, just try again. For me to go, oh, am I really going to just keep doing the same thing again? With no kind of ability to kind of improve and, like, increase my odds. So you do need to reflect on those no's, definitely, but don't let them stop you from the end goal.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's so many stories out there, aren't there? I was reading about the girl that set up Canva, for example. It's a classic, what she did 100 no's before she got the yes. And it's part of that resilience piece. It's part of that, like you say, checking in. Is this really what I want? Is this taking me in the right direction? How does this feel? Is this really what I need personally? Is it what the business needs? It gives you that opportunity. And I think this is the roller coaster, or I liken it to my journey between. I live in South Wales, my parents live in North Wales, and I liken entrepreneurship to that kind of like ups and downs and twists and turns and like massive like cattle in the middle of the road, have to go back a bit. And that's what it's like.
Oh,
And you've
absolutely.
highlighted that. Yeah. So what does the future hold for you and your business? You're still working with your brother?
Yeah, since we launched Doormarked, we do a couple of different things now. So Doormarked is still running, ticking along. Thankfully, it largely runs itself. It's quite automated, which is very nice. And we've tried to create it as lean as possible. So we don't actually have like any hires or anything like that. It's just me and him that kind of work on it. And as a result, we've then kind of gone, what are we actually passionate about? What do we actually want to do? Because we realized that we fell into this problem of being desperate to start a business and going, okay, let's find a problem and create a solution, rather than properly kind of reflecting on things that we necessarily were really passionate about, or that we properly like that we'd experienced personally, and that we could really kind of get behind, I guess, more with more like fulfillment. I think that's the right thing. Like it's ultimately you need to be really passionate about your idea for you to get that fulfillment from it. So he's lent into his own business ventures and I've lent into mine, which are largely within empowering and helping other healthcare professionals to navigate career doubts and if they want to start a business. So I've recently just launched the Clinical Shift, which is a platform supporting healthcare professionals who are considering a career change. And it's very much a platform to help people navigate doubt. So it's not to encourage people to leave, it's to help people, anyone that's kind of sitting there thinking, oh, maybe the grass is greener on the other side, to go through and review that and maybe explore alternatives, and maybe leave if that's what they realize is right for them. But similarly, maybe actually realize that medicine is right for them. They maybe just need to make a few tweaks here and there to make it better tick their boxes. So yeah, so that's something I'm frantically working on building. And there's a podcast with that as well as a platform, which is very much just a landing page at the moment, but it's yeah, a work in progress. So
So what's that gonna look? Is that like a membership, or
I'm
when you
trying
say a
to,
platform?
from my business hat, and perhaps your listeners will be interested to hear kind of like how I've explored building this, is I very much want to try and make it as free to consumer users, so to healthcare professionals as possible. I think we should be able to access career advice for free as much as we can. So that is a monthly newsletter where resources are sent out. There's going to be various resources on the website that they can access and engage. But then there will be a directory of coaches, career coaches that we endorse and that we work closely with. There will be a directory as well of courses that they can attend that can perhaps help them develop certain skill sets, whether that's maybe like in aesthetics, if that's something that they're interested in pursuing, or whether that's in kind of like life support training, or maybe that's in completely other fields like, I don't know, photography or nail tech, or like whatever it might be that they maybe just want to explore. There will be again a directory of those various courses there for them to explore as to whether there's something they want to do to maybe give them confidence to kind of just like start making a change, or just to, like I said, explore.
I think so. It's interesting because I think it sounds like a sort of similar business model, this sort of matching scheme, like
Yeah.
bringing the users, and it's a similar concept but a different group of people, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is kind of where I've gone. We've learned so much from our previous business. and we know what the infrastructure's there, and we know what works when it comes to also when it's is it easier to get consumer users to pay for a product or a service, or business users to pay for a product or service, right?
Yeah.
And a really great case study of this that I've just come across recently is, so Loop, they're Loop earplugs. Have you heard of Loop earplugs?
Oh,
So they're these
oh,
like little
actually, yes, 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 I have. Yes.
yeah, so you can put these little earplugs in your ears to obviously, like to like quieten and sound. Like you can use them when you're sleeping, or as like noise protection when you go to like bars and clubs or like music concerts and things. But anyway, going on their website, having a look at them, because my brother's actually working with the brand, and he was like, "Gosh, Ellie, have you seen this?" And they do commercial. They have like commercial contracts where corporate, I guess, like businesses will be able to buy, like, we're talking tens of thousands of these earplugs, and they clearly have this, it's not just a D2C business, it's a D2B business where they're selling these earplugs on bulk to probably companies like Amazon, like Google, like, big warehouses where they're distribution centers where their staff need ear protection. And this is a classic example of a business that's taken a product and is not only just selling direct to a consumer, but it's also selling direct to businesses. And sometimes it's a lot easier to get businesses to buy into products because they
Mm.
understand it's easier for them to see the value. It's easier for them to they're a bit more commercially minded when it comes to understanding what it can provide them with.
But I think it's also a really good example of you. Obviously, you're really talented at that aspect of it, like whether, bringing people together, understanding this need for this person to have this product and
Yeah.
matching them together. And if that is where your skill set is, that can be rolled out into lots of different groups of people. And I think it's very similar to me and my community building and supporting people in a sort of community. Like basically with the How people, we were rocking up every Thursday on a Zoom call at 7 o'clock, and we were making brownies and doing journaling and having inspirational speakers come in. And essentially that's what I'm doing now, except we don't make brownies and finger knitting, although I'm sure the medics that I work with would love to do that. But it's a similar thing because that's what I really love doing, but it's just a different group of people. And that's an example of pivoting, but knowing your
Yeah.
strengths, and knowing the kind of stuff that you like doing behind the scenes. So that's super exciting, and I'd really like to link that up in the show notes so people can find out more. And I think there's a massive value here, Ellie, about your age, being a bit, younger and having that understanding of what that junior doctor pressure is like. I've got a couple of nephews that are in the at the beginning of their medical careers, and I feel quite detached from their decision making and what's
Mm.
around them at the moment because it's very different
Yeah.
to how it was when I was there. And I think, it feels very heavy. I think for people, it's like, well, what do I do? Do I go and work in Australia where things are better? And, the NHS in England is disbanding. And what does that mean? And what does that look like? And shit, what else can I do? Because I've lost all ability to think beyond medicine.
Yeah.
So I think this is massively valuable. And off the top of my head, I can think of several people that really need this. So
Oh,
that's
thank you.
exciting.
It is, I think, and that's where it honestly comes from for me, because this is something that again I started talking about on social media. I started talking about how I'd felt, disempowered by the system around me, and how I'd felt trapped for so long, and how I'd kind of like found the courage and confidence to kind of do something a bit different. Um, and the whole point of the clinical shift is just to help people realize that they're not stuck.
Yeah.
And even if they do, even if they decide that they wanna kind of become a medical student, see where things go, if they wanna, start specialty training or whatever, like, that's fine. But, if you wanna make a change, you can. Just because you've made that decision, it's not fait accompli. And I personally I think it is improving, but particularly when I was at med school, and as a med student, there wasn't a lot of discussion about other things that you could do. There was this overriding assumption you're gonna go into the NHS training pathway, you're gonna become a consultant, that's it, kind of. And it doesn't have to be that way.
No. Okay, amazing. There's been a lot. We've talked about an awful lot. You touched on a few really important things earlier that in terms of advice. But I'd really love it if you could just share a couple of things that you would say to somebody, particularly, I guess most of my listeners are in this sort of entrepreneurial space as opposed to the clinical space. That's why they're here. What would you say to somebody that is thinking about starting their own business, has got an idea? is maybe holding back, what would be your advice to your kind of early entrepreneurial self?
The first thing that I would honestly say to them is I'd be like, you need to run through the 3P checklist for your business idea. So I always say to anyone, if you're starting a business idea, it needs to either be like a previous profession that you've had, like that's going to help, like you're going to be more likely to succeed in a business if you're starting something that you've already got experience in and you're already got some credibility in. So if it's one of those, then you can have some confidence that this is probably going to be an okay idea for you to pursue. The second thing would be, is it a problem that you've previously experienced? And if so, and it's not just a problem that you've plucked out from the air, then that's usually a great starting point because, again, there will likely be other people just like you who have experienced that problem. And you can then just lean into creating a business around yourself, for you, because there will be other people just like you. So that's a great starting point. Again, have confidence. This idea is a good one. Or is it something you're really passionate about? And if it is, and it's something that you've been thinking about for years, you are already like well connected in the space because you already like, say you love playing tennis and you already know all the tennis courts around and you've got tennis coaches and you know all about tennis brands and where you can learn about tennis, all this kind of stuff, and you just live and breathe it. Then like why are you not going? If it's one of those 3Ps, have confidence that it's an idea that suits you, and aligns with you, and then you've just got to get started because it's only going to get easier. It won't be pretty, but the quicker you start, the faster you learn, and the faster things start to fall more into place.
Amazing. Love that. 3Ps: previous profession, a problem that you previously experienced, or passion. And I think having that passion piece, people say, oh, well, you don't need to run a business that that is your passion. But actually what this comes down to, I think, is the ability to get up day after day after day and do it even when you're not being paid. So that was my, always it was like, would I get up an hour earlier every day, which is the only time I have to work on my business, without being paid for the next 3 years? And if that's a no, then it's not
And
worth
no, it's not
carrying
for
on
me.
with.
Absolutely. It comes down to what you said about the facing rejection and being like, are you more likely to get up and keep going when you're passionate about something? And you will. Even if you have to take a bit of time away to kind of just like rebuild your enthusiasm, that's fine.
Amazing. Ellie, thank you so much for joining us today. I'll link everything up in the show notes, and I know that people will be reaching out to get in touch with you. So good luck with everything that you do in the future.
Thank you so much, Joe. I've really enjoyed myself. It's been lovely talking to you.
I hope this episode has sparked some new ideas or challenged your thinking. Transitioning from medicine to business is not easy. It's about adapting our skills while embracing the unknowns of entrepreneurship. It can be nerve-wracking, but remember, you are not alone on this journey. Please feel free to reach out to me via direct message on LinkedIn or Instagram, or just shoot me an email at joe@bendylegs.com for support. And don't forget to grab the free PDF from the show notes, From Stethoscope to Startup, which is your go-to guide and resource for diving into entrepreneurship. Many thanks for tuning in. I will see you next time. Thanks for spending your precious time with me.
This has been a Monkey Pants Productions podcast.